All right, guys. So here we are. Let me just make sure we are recorded because we have so many people I know that are at work, and they said, if this isn't recorded, I'm going to literally strangle you, Rachel, because I'm freaking out about this. So I am completely excited because as I was telling you guys, you know me, I was like this. Like every day, kind of a little nutso, which I'm in full acceptance of. And I think, too often we hear from entrepreneurs, oh yeah, I've got it all figured out. And we don't always. Something happens like this, a regulation or a law, and we look to people like GENA SHINGLE JAFFE, who is right here to help us out, to come and show up on these webinars and share, the 250-page plus document that she has spent the 50 to probably 250 hours going through and helping us to understand. So we are so lucky today to be listening to Jenna share about this and how this is really going to affect you. So can you just tell me a little about yourself and just share with everyone who you are and all that great stuff?
Yeah. So hello. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Jenna. My full name is Genevieve Jaffe, and I call myself a sparkly lawyer for entrepreneurs because I love all things glitter and unicorn and confetti and all that good stuff. And I started my business about 4.5 years ago now, which is crazy. I was a corporate lawyer in New York City. Obviously, I'm happy doing that. So started my own business to really help, female entrepreneurs who run online businesses understand what they need to protect themselves. So it's been really amazing, especially since I have a son now. So I'm able to be home with him all day, which is awesome. He's napping. Yay.
We know that.
White
I know
noise
those
machine,
days. You're like, so blessed.
I know. So yeah, people have been freaking out about GDPR. And there's really not a lot to freak out about, promise.
Well, and that's why what I was saying to everyone before we even started recording is that when this first came out, even for myself, I was, everyone was saying different things, and we hear all these different things. We hear, don't worry about anything. Do nothing, do something, do everything. So there is a beautiful balance, and that's what I wanted for you to break down. And I think also, especially for the majority of people here who are in the health and wellness business, we have also an extra layer, which is we do health histories, not just discovery sessions. We're working with people. So it's not just the opt-in freebies, not just the webinars. It's storing private information that is, so I wanted to, roll through kind of what is the basic of GDPR for those. And I love what you said when I heard one of your webinars. You're like, this is GDPR for dummies. And I was like, thank you. So can you kind of GDPR dummy? And that doesn't mean anyone's dumb. That means we're not lawyers, guys. So.
Oh my gosh. And even as a lawyer, when I first, heard of this, I was like, what is happening? Because it's a lot of, if you do this, then this, but maybe this, but maybe this, but maybe this. And it's like, ugh. So what Lisa Fraley, we work together a lot, what we did was really just like dig deep and like get into it and then bring it back out and kind of just say, okay, these are really the important things you need to think about, the things you consider. And then what was great is that we were like, all right, let's give people options as to how to comply based on how comfortable you are with risk. So, we'll get into that. So, and if anybody has questions, like please feel free, post whatever. And then if after, Rachel, you can share my details because we got 3 days, people. So, all right, here we go. But I promise it's really easy. It's really, really simple. Okay. So GDPR, for people who don't know, is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is just a fancy way of saying new privacy laws that are coming out of the European Union and go into effect this Friday, May 25th. So 2018. So we got 3 days, and actually everything needs to be up and running by May 24th, because starting May 25th, like when that date hits, like this is when it all, and it's funny, somebody compared it to Y2K when it was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And it's like, nothing happened. You know what I mean? Like, it's like people are freaking out. And yes, there are things you need to do. There's things you want to make sure that you're doing for sure. But the internet's not going to explode. Your business is not going to explode. Like, we're good. We're good.
Nobody's going to knock on your house and say the day it's over. But
No
it does feel that way. And, I
does.
think that's the reason that I'm so grateful for the time that you're taking out of your life, because there is that feeling of, oh my goodness, like, how are we putting this together? And how does this affect me? And it's not just, it's almost like there's entrepreneurial, and then there's marketing, and then there's this, but and as you said, it is a big regulation. And when you look at it on what do I need to take, there are the layers of options. And I love what you said. So let's just get down and dirty.
Awesome. Great. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I've seen a lot of emails from non-lawyers trying to explain it. So here's what you need to know. So simple things. Who does this apply to? Anyone in the EU. So if you live in the EU, every single thing applies to you. If you live outside of the EU, all of this applies when you are marketing to people within the EU. If you have anyone on your list that's in the EU, this applies to you. Now, the tricky thing is that this is the World Wide Web. So anyone can come to your website and you don't know. And so you want to make sure that your website is at least compliant. So updating your privacy policy is the biggest, number one, most important thing you have to do. Super simple. I have a template already available for you. Rachel will share that link. Download it, pop in a few business information, upload it onto your website. Like, done. Easy. So that's the first thing that I want you guys to do. Number one, update your privacy policy. That's easy. Done. Number two, and this is it. I have two things I want you guys to do. And this number two is gonna be the whammy, right? Which is updating how you're getting consent from people. So as I shared, this is basically a new privacy law coming out of the EU. And the EU is really about protecting personal information. And the GDPR calls this personal data. So you might hear people talk about personal data. You might see new privacy policies or new legal documents coming out with personal data. Personal data just basically means anything that can identify a person, which can be as simple as a name and an email for a newsletter. Credit card information, anything like that. So if you're collecting any of this from anyone, and this also includes an IP address. So when you go to a website and there's like cookies where they track.
Or Facebook pixels. I mean, I think this is why I always, because a lot of people think, well, I don't have a website, or I use ClickFunnels. If you're doing any tracking, you're running Facebook ads, all of this, you are now going to fall under GDPR because you could potentially be collecting information from people in the EU. And some people say, well, I don't have any clients in there. I have, a local business. If you have a website and you're doing any sort of online marketing, advertising, whatever, you might have somebody from the EU coming to your site. So that's why I'm saying, all right, let's just be as safe as possible. This isn't a $10,000 fix. You know what I mean? Like, this is getting a template, putting it on your site. Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. So in terms of the consent piece, and this is where people are freaking out when it comes to marketing and having people sign up for their list or sign up for a freebie or a webinar. So I'm going to give you a few different examples and a few different options. But first, I want to define a few things to make it clear. So the GDPR requires that you have something called a lawful basis for processing data. And that basically just means, do you have consent from the person to collect their information? Do you have a contract with the person that would allow you to collect their information? Or is there something called a legitimate interest to collect and process their information? And I'll get into that in a minute, which is a little bit of a carve out for marketers, which is giving us a little bit more leeway in terms of collecting information. All right, consent. Okay, so consent requires what they're calling an unambiguous affirmative action, which is a fancy way of saying that if somebody is signing up for something, they have to actually consent to be added to your list. And that can mean this checkbox. A lot of people are talking about a checkbox. So let's say, for example, that I'm marketing a webinar and I have people sign up and saying, you're going to receive the link to my webinar, the replay of my webinar, and all that good stuff. Now, in the past, I could just add all these people to my list. Moving forward with GDPR, you can't do that unless you're very clear
and have a little, now there's a few options. As I said, we're going to get to a few options here, but if you have a little checkbox on the sign up of the webinar that says, I also want to be added to your list. So you need to have that little checkbox. That little checkbox is that affirmative action, that affirmative act that the GDPR is asking that you get. Now, you cannot require that somebody check that box, and you also cannot have it already be a pre-ticked checkbox either as a condition for them signing up for your webinar, right? So this is not the only way you can get this consent, but this is like the safest way of having this little checkbox here. That's that affirmative act of getting consent, saying, okay, I'm signing up for your webinar, but I'm also allowing you to add me to your list to receive other information about your business. Okay. Let's talk about a freebie though. And like I said, I'll give you other examples of how you collect this, but a lot of people are like, well, what about my freebies? Like, do I need, you can't actually now with a freebie add people to your list anymore. So I have a workaround that can, but typically as marketers, we would say, okay, sign up for, grab my freebie on the, 10 best smoothie recipes to kickstart your morning. And then they'd sign up, we'd give them their freebie, and then we'd put them into our funnel, right? Or nurture sequence, or we just continue emailing them. You can't do that anymore because the reason that people are signing up is because they want their freebie. You have to give them their freebie and then they can leave. So the way around this is it's really semantics. And instead, we're going to say, sign up for my list and get your 10 free smoothies to kickstart your morning. Something like that. So it's really just it's transparency. It's saying you're signing up for my list. And for signing up for my list, I'm going to gift you with this free smoothie guide. So you can incentivize opt-ins, encouraging people to sign up for something by giving them a gift. And the GDPR basically says you can't unduly penalize somebody who doesn't want to sign up for your list. So, when it comes with a freebie, you just have to give them the freebie and they don't have to sign up for your list. But if we market it the way of, if you sign up for my list and get this, that's fine. Because how are you really penalizing somebody who doesn't want to, sign up for your list with a smoothie guide? They're like missing out on a smoothie guide, big deal. So in terms of the freebie, that's our little bit of a workaround. So if you market the list, you don't need that checkbox because you're being transparent. You're saying you're signing up for my list. And as a gift, as a thank you, I'm going to give you this free guide.
So to confirm, because I think I listened to you even say this the other day, and all I was thinking in my head was, oh my God, okay, let me carve out 15 to 20 hours because I built my list by having about 15 freebies. And for my client and then for my business part, both sides. So to confirm, what you're saying is if somebody right after this and they spend the next, 24 hours, and they say, okay, I'm literally going to go by the privacy policy. And guys, understand the verbiage on the privacy policy isn't just you updating. Like this.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm telling you guys from me buying it, like says key verbiage that declares and states how you're storing, how you're using, what you're doing. It isn't just you being like, oh, let me write a few things down. This is like key verbiage that's keeping you safe, and also sets clear terms for people to know how you're using the information. So what you're saying is that I could go and change all the verbiage to say, join my list and you get this. And then I wouldn't need to have that little box right there, because then I'm being transparent to say, look, I'm not going to sell you after. You know that you're joining my list. You know that. And on the privacy policy, which if they go and read that, it says what I offer and states every different thing.
Yeah. And this is what's a little bit confusing. It's because it's like, okay, even though people are like, well, people can unsubscribe if they don't want to be there. The point of GDPR is to get rid of that. It's getting rid of people just being added to lists. And then them having to actually go and unsubscribe. Now it's them having the opportunity to be like, yes, I want to be on this person's list. I want to receive emails from them. Yep. And if you're signing up for something that says, join my list and get the free guide, you're joining the first thing. It's the first thing. It's instead of a bait and switch, right? You're being transparent. You're saying you're getting on my list and you'll get this. Instead of you get this, and then all of a sudden you're getting all these other emails.
we're actually, after the, seventh time that I listened to your webinar the other day with Lisa, and I came out of, massive heartbeat and just, only because, like I said, when we hear about this, it's like, and this is going into effect in 14 days, prepare yourself. And you're like, with what? I'm trying, and just like you said, email after email, and you're trying to put the pieces together. So I was so grateful that you guys did that. And then grateful that you said, do you want to do a webinar for your people? What it occurred to me is that we're actually going back to a state where it used to be. Yeah. Everyone said, join my newsletter list. You knew right up front what that deal was. Yep. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that. And yeah, I will be adding all of the templates, guys, that they have. It's really amazing. And I encourage 100% to get this today and to safeguard yourself.
Yeah. And the cool thing about the privacy policy, what you mentioned, is that so GDPR actually requires us now to put the privacy policy in plain English. So Rachel, you've looked through it, you've read it, you can probably understand all of it.
Yeah.
It's very clear as to what is happening with everything. There's not a lot of legal language in there because people now, the law is requiring lawyers to write in a way that people actually understand.
Right. And even in the US, guys, we've talked about this. I mean, California had to have a privacy policy. It wasn't required. So this is actually making it to a point where, the list selling and the people stealing emails just off of Facebook and LinkedIn those days are kind of done. So I have a question even before we move on with like the second option of the checkbox, or the second option is if people have products like Asana, doTERRA, these network marketing companies, Beachbody, which a lot of coaches have, and they're in the EU, they're in the UK, but their lists, so to speak, are maybe within the company, or they're in a third party. Are they protected by that third party, or are they allowed to get leads and say, here, sign up for this opt-in freebie and then market to them? Or is it the same thing? Join this list, and then they have to be they can't market, or they can say, I'm sending you a sample. How does that work?
It's the same thing. I mean, it doesn't matter if this is a product or a service. It has to do with the collection of personal information, no matter what you're doing. And if you're sending somebody a sample, you're getting their address. So it's, what are you doing with that address? And it's
being really clear, like if you are doing a Facebook ad, instead of sign up for this, you're saying, hey, if you want to learn about essential oils, sign up and I will send you samples. And really clear, and then, talk to them and actually get into the conversation of human connection instead of just sell.
Yes, I love that human connection. That's, I think, a lot of what this is. It's treating the people on your list like humans, which a lot of people haven't done, because they see people as dollar signs. And and especially it's interesting after this whole Facebook thing came out with Cambridge Analytica. I mean, GDPR has been in the works for 2 years, so this isn't a result of that, but it was like really good timing of getting people aware and worried of sorts. I don't like to worry people, but about their information and what's happening to it, and wanting to then respect other people's information. So
So we have option one of the box,
the checkbox,
and then an option two would be
So option two. So we're still talking about consent here. So getting people to actually consent, because remember, there's also the contract and legitimate interest. So consent. So we have the checkbox. Now the problem with the checkbox is that people let's say that you're in the US and you're marketing to people in the US, you don't need them to check that box. Like GDPR doesn't apply to them when it comes to that specific piece, right? So if you're marketing your webinar and you have that checkbox and they don't check it, technically you can still add them to your list. But for me, I'd be like, well, I didn't check that box and that was available to me. That was an option for me and I didn't check it. And yet you still added me to my list. I think it's kind of like a move. So you don't want to miss out on people outside of the EU. So there's a few other options. One would be still on that same landing page. Instead of having a checkbox, to have a drop-down menu. So you could have options. It would say something like, would you like to be added to my email list? And then you'd have to pick yes or no. And you can have a required question. So you can make them answer a question in order to sign up for the webinar. You just can't force them to say yes, join the list. And the thing that I like about the required question is that people aren't missing it. Because a lot of times, like if I see all these checkboxes, I'm like, nah, I want to sign up for the webinar. But this is like, right, this is when you hit submit and it's like, error, you missed something. And I'm like, oh, crap. It forces people to actually read it. Yeah. So that's one option, have it on the landing page. The second option would be to have it on the thank you page, so the thank you for signing up page. But again, the problem there is that people might miss it. They might miss out on it. So another option with this is to send it in the email, the thank you email or the sign up email or the email that has the details of the webinar.
Like almost what you're saying is pretty much put it everywhere. A thank you page, a replay, a success, as many places as you can.
Saying like, hey, like I'm, click here if you'd like to be added to my list. Or like before we send you the details of the webinar, would you like to be added to our list? Yes or no? And obviously say it in a much more inviting way, enticing way. But it's something like that so that they have to do something before they get what they signed up for. So it's not sneaky. It's being transparent. And even if they say no, you're still giving them what they signed up for. You're still giving them the webinar information.
I love that. And I love how simple you made it, because I think we all, like I said, we've all sat there thinking, my God, I got to get GDPR ready. That's a tongue twister. I've messed this up 50,000 like GDPR ready. And we think I have to go through all these opt-in freebies or do I kill them? But so many of them are floating off into the internet world. One thing I want to confirm, because like I said, all this information, and I do want to get to some questions, double opt-in or not?
If you market to Canada, you must have a double opt-in.
Okay.
So so just like how California required the privacy policy, but no one else did, but if you marketed to California, if you market to Canada, you must have a double opt-in. They require it. Now, it's interesting. It's like GDPR. Only applies to the people in the EU. This only applies to people in Canada. But you don't want to mess up. You don't want to miss. So even for me, I'm a U.S. lawyer, so my people are pretty much all in the U.S., but I get people from Canada on my list all the time. So I have a double opt-in.
And then as far as what we were talking about, so somebody does a health history. They have gender, age, vital information about their health, yada, yada, yada. Used to do it in Q form, used to do it, Dropbox, used to do it, all that. Who is I think instead of, going on a 20-minute yada, 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 we're up north, girls. Who is GDPR compliant for processing? You agree. Now I'm going to hold. What is the process?
If you're collecting anything that GDPR defines now as sensitive data, this is going to apply to anyone collecting any sort of health, medical background type information. You have more requirements.
Just breathing. Sparkle.
So it's okay. So instead of this checkbox, you can't just do that. You actually need a signature saying, like letting people know that, okay, let's say you have an intake form, for example. At the bottom of the intake form now, what I want you to have is, I understand that I am giving Rachel my health and medical information, sign and date. It sounds stupid and it sounds obvious, like clearly you're filling out an intake form, but I want it to be very clear, like I am, affirmatively giving my information to Rachel or something. Like, it doesn't have to be that specific language, but you need a signature. That signature can be an electronic signature. That's fine. You can go through any e-platform you would like. The reason is that Sensitive data, which is any sort of health, medical, anything, requires what they call explicit consent. And explicit consent needs a stronger act than just the checkbox. It needs the signature. So if you're collecting and storing any sort of information like that, you need to actually go one step further and get this signature. And I suggest getting it. Number one, you're going to have a contract with this person anyway, right? So you want to have it there, but you also want to have it on any intake forms or anything that people are filling out some sort of history, just so that if they come back to you, they can't be like, well, I didn't know you were going to keep this, even though again, it seems obvious. You can say you actually signed it and dated it. And this was proof. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you have a little extra step, but it's not scary. If you think about it, you're already collecting, you're already sending an intake form. Now all you have to do is make sure they sign it. That's it.
It's just showing. And I think what I keep hearing, and my last question is going to be about the email list, and then we're going to get to some questions, is I keep hearing, show the footprint, show the footprint. Like you have just show the acknowledgement, show the acknowledgement. It's all about transparency. And that's the part where I was like, finally, after the 7th time I listened to the webinar the other day, I was like, okay, feeling better. I wish I would have heard this, to be prior.
Yeah. No, I know. But like, if you think about it, okay. So number one, update your privacy policy.
Yeah.
Number two, make sure that people are really understanding what they're signing up for and what you're doing with their information. So getting the signature on your client intake form, if you want to have that checkbox, have them check that box. The last option to get consent that I wanted to just quickly mention, it's not foolproof, but you can segment your list and only get consent from the people in the EU. And how do you do this? Your newsletter provider should be able to tell you based on somebody's IP address where they're located. Again, there can always be tech glitches, so someone could fall through the cracks. But it is one way to make sure that you're not missing out on people outside of the EU. Because remember, they don't need to consent to be added to your list. You can just add them to your list for now. I'm sure other countries are going to follow suit, but for now, they don't need to give you consent. So instead of missing out on these people, when somebody signs up for your webinar, if they're outside the EU, they just automatically get added to your list. If they're in the EU, they get this separate confirmation email that's like, hey, do you want to stay on my list? So that's another option that you can do to get consent.
Which comes to the email list, because we're right now at the 22nd, which means that, we have a few more days, and come the 25th, if say, you've done a re-engagement or like that, hey, somebody was saying, what about verbiage to send your list? Like, hey, did you know about GDPR? This is what it means. And this is what's going to be happening, which means you have to click here to be on the list. Yes. If they have not clicked and said yes to the dress, and you possibly have people in the EU, in the UK, what in theory should happen after that date?
It's actually before that date.
On the 24th at 11:59.
24th, actually. And make sure it's whatever time zone they're in. No one's going to realize it's a few hours behind, but okay, so you've probably been getting emails from people that are asking you whether or not you want to stay on their list. I've sent them myself. Technically, you only have to send them to people in the EU, but a lot of people are using this just as like a refresh of their list, which I did. I sent it to everyone, and my list went down by thousands, and I was so excited because I was like, oh, great, these are the people who want to be here. I don't care what my overall number is. I care about how many people engage with me. So basically what you need to do is that send an email to either everyone or people in the EU just saying like, hey, like you might have heard about this GDPR thing. I want to make sure that you still want to be here, that you still want to engage with me. I have, all this amazing content to share with you. Make it really enticing. Make people want to stay. It can be something value driven. You can be like, here's a free checklist. Here's a free recipe. Here's a free whatever. And there's more where that came from if you decide to stay on my list. So if you want to stay and continue to hear from me, click here. And then they would get segmented in your list in magical tech land that I have no idea how that works. And no idea. And anyone who does not click before the 25th must be deleted from your email list. Like, you got to delete their information. They can't just like chill out and sit there. And that is because the GDPR defines processing data as deletion. It includes deleting somebody's information. Which is silly, but they do. Now, you can save certain pieces of information. So if you have, a legal obligation or a tax obligation, or some sort of, if you have a medical reason, for if you have a license, or you have to prove that somebody was a client, or, just for safekeeping of sorts, you can save that information. And in your privacy policy, and it says it in the template that I have already, that you may keep certain things, even if somebody requests it for legal obligations, stuff like that. So you can maintain that information. So you have to actually delete these people, and everybody's freaking out. But the thing is that there are people who aren't opening your emails anyway, that haven't opened them ever. No. Like, literally ever. And they're just hanging out there, not reading them anyway. So it doesn't matter if your email list goes from 10,000 to 2,000. Because guess what? I bet you only those 2,000 people were opening them to begin with. Yeah. So your open rate, and everyone's open rate, is going to like go way up. Mine did, because all these people weren't reading them anyway. So it was, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's quality over quantity. Okay. And
so guys, I know a lot of information. Like I said, it took me, full transparency as always. I don't think you guys expect anything else from me. Is it took me a while to process this. So this is your first time. Take a breather, take a walk, scream in a pillow, then come back, watch this again. Maybe like have a little cry, or maybe you have no list, but regardless, this is more about taking the steps. Privacy policy has to be on your site. So I have a question here. Where do you post the privacy policy?
Yep. Great question. So the privacy policy goes where it always has gone, in the footer of your website, so that it shows up on every page of your site. And it now has to go as a little link anywhere you collect somebody's information. So a contact page, a sign up page, your freebie, your webinar, like anywhere underneath the submit button, you just have to say something like, when we may collect, use, and process your data. This is like GDPR language, but in accordance with our privacy policy. And then you link to it. Because again, about transparency, it has to be right where somebody's giving you their information, you're telling them what you're doing with it. So this is easy. This is like an easy fix, right? We put the privacy policy in our footer, we get our updated one, then we just put links anywhere we collect information. Invoices too. Invoices too. Yeah.
That's a great, and guys, for any of you like Acuity, you do all that, calendar, pretty much what we're saying is put it everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Everywhere that you think somebody could land.
It's just a link.
Subdomains, if you're doing lead pages, ClickFunnels, all those extra little gizmos that could possibly is not on your site, put it there too.
And it's been a little while where Facebook, you can't even run ads to a page that doesn't have a privacy policy. So
I actually have a question, because what I'm seeing from some of the emails and this is why I also think it's confusing. So I've seen people who just send, hey, this is our updated privacy policy. So I think that's also why people get a little confused. Is it that they're not adhering to necessarily what the 250-page book says you have to do?
So it depends, because remember, if you're not in the EU, you don't have to consent to stay on their list. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to send anything to anyone in the US or Canada or Australia or whatever. It only has to go to the EU. Now, the reason that people are sending updated privacy policies is it depends. In your current policy, it might say we can change this at any time. But it also might say, which our current one does say, is that we are allowed to update this policy at any time without letting you know, unless there's a material or significant change. And then we will let you know, we will update you. So, if that's what your policy said before, you do have to let people know, because this was a complete change of privacy policy. And even though it's in people's favor, because it's like you're being much more transparent and protective of their information. It's just letting them know, because before you weren't letting people know, hey, I'm going to be collecting your IP address, and I'm going to use Facebook pixels, and I'm going to use your information to retarget you for Facebook. Like all these things that you now have in that document that people might want to know and they might object to. And if they object to it, then they can opt out.
Is there anything, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Do you guys have any other questions? Do service providers, virtual assistants setting up a GDPR components for clients need to be concerned for any future liability?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of people ask this question of like, hey, I'm not collecting their information. I'm doing it on behalf of someone else. So in your contract with your client, so if you have a client agreement with this person, or if they have like an independent contractor agreement with you, there should be a section in there on confidentiality, and that you may be privy to confidential information, which includes a client list, and that you agree to keep it confidential. And then in that person's privacy policy, there would be information that says we may share your information with third parties, which would be you, people on our team, processors, merchant accounts, all that. We may share your information with trusted third parties. So they should be making sure everybody should be updating their privacy policy, but they certainly should be. And that information should be in the contract that you have with your
and so for service providers, because this actually brings up a question even I have. So just like on the privacy policy, we declare who that information, like my team members, Facebook ad person, blah, blah, blah. You declare who could possibly be processing, like Infusionsoft processing.
Right.
Does that service provider need to declare on their privacy policy that they're processing my clients?
No. Everybody's privacy policy is going to be very similar, because what you need to say in your privacy policy it's laid out for you. The GDPR lays out what everybody needs to say. Now, everybody's is going to be a little different because we do different things with different information. But you can be as broad as we share your information, and this language is already in the template, but we share your information with trusted third parties, including but not limited to.
Got it.
Team members, merchant accounts, email provider, you know what I mean? So you're not explicitly listing everything. And then it says, and then this is the new thing, we also ensure that these third parties are GDPR compliant.
Got it.
That means that whoever asked that question, meaning that you'd have to have a GDPR compliant privacy policy. Or that because we need to make sure that you're treating their information
in the appropriate way.
Exactly.
I think you covered everything. I really do.
There is one thing I didn't cover, which is legitimate interest, actually. And people have questions. People always are asking about it. So if you want me to just
please.
Okay. It's a gray area. Of course it is. So legitimate interest is what GDPR has given marketers as a little bit of a carve out of getting consent. So remember how I told you that if you signed up for a webinar, you can only send them information on the webinar. You can't add them to your list. Well, if you potentially can add somebody to your list, let's say I'm promoting a webinar, and my webinar is about legal information, right? I'm talking to you about GDPR. I'm doing a webinar about GDPR. And I say, okay, so I did my webinar. I sent them the recording. Now I want to send them emails about different legal templates. Now, when you send it for my webinar, you didn't explicitly agree to get more emails from me. However, I can argue that you have a legitimate interest in hearing about ways that you can legally protect your business since you signed up for a legal webinar. So basically, it's would somebody reasonably expect to receive more information from you based on what they originally signed up for? And yes, I could make that argument. It's a gray area because you have to be able to prove the legitimate interest. But that's the reason that they're saying it's a little bit of a carve out for marketers, because when people sign up for something, it's they probably do want to hear more from you, but I don't want this to mean that you can just take everyone's information. Right. It's a free for all.
I mean, is it safe to say, let's just take a few, we have like 2 or 3 minutes left. Yeah. Is it safe to say that hypothetically, if, and again, I'm not holding you to this, we're just that if somebody was, they're past buyers and they ran a detox or they did a challenge and they were part of a challenge, that they would possibly, even though they didn't click the GDPR, like click me back in, right, but they could go back to that individual list of the people who did a challenge and they could email them and say, hey, I know you did a challenge before, I'm doing this. Do you want to come again? And maybe that person, because they saw challenge, they saw it personalized coming from that one person, would possibly, or, hey, I saw you buy this. Would you want to come back and do this?
I'd say there's legitimate interest there, because if I bought a challenge from someone, and I did, 21-day fix or whatever, and then, 2 months later, somebody was like, hey, you did the 21-day fix, back in whatever. Would you be interested in doing it again? Here's more information. Totally reasonable. Yep. I personally think that's totally reasonable to do. So it really is, it's about your tolerance for risk. And
also, I think it goes back to what you said earlier. It's going back to how things originally were. Right. It was, hey, there weren't 20 email sequences back in the day. Things were like, this was who I am. Do you want to know more about what I laugh when people are like, how'd you build your list? And I'm like, I just told people, like, this is who I am. This is how bad it was. Hit reply if you want to know more.
Oh my gosh. Nothing. I had so many calls. I'm like, hey, give me a free call. Like
consequences. Nothing. Because marketing wasn't that back then. It was one follow-up, if that. Seriously, if there was a follow-up. I remember, no joke, guys, I want you to know this. When the person took me from MailChimp to Infusionsoft, he was like, don't you have sequences? I was like, I didn't do sequences. If somebody wanted to work with me, they would find me. He was like, but that's not automation. I'm like, people are not automated. I don't open who opens something after 2 or 3, unless you were like gift.
Right. And that's how I set my sequences up now, because having a baby, I'm not as in front of my computer. So I literally send like 1 million gifts when somebody signs up.
So you have taken, and that's why I want to thank you. You have just lessened the, it's not even overwhelmed, because, it was more oh my God, everything is changing. So overwhelmed doesn't even describe the word that I felt. But you've made this palatable to say with action steps of what do I need to take to make this safe, but also to humanize this back to a time. I mean, I said email marketing was dead 2 years ago, and it's because we've screwed it up. People are like,
I open like 1 or 2 newsletters.
Am I going to get another? Yep. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And guys, I will send you the replay, and please check out, the templates. They are really amazing, and it will help you to take a breath and know that you are secure and safe and totally regulated.
Yep, and can get it up. Mimi said, where are the templates? Rachel said that you can literally get it up today.
Like in a hot second.
Super easy. Like there's the pieces you have to customize, but it's like including your email address. And people ask this question, actually, yes, you do have to include business address. If you're home, I suggest you go get a PO box today.
Yeah, I have to do that.
Yep. It's like, ugh. I've had a PO box for a while because I don't want to put my email or my address anywhere, obviously. So you might have to go get a PO box, because you do have to include an address these days.
I know. Thank you so much, guys. Have a beautiful one, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, guys. See you later. Replay will come very soon, I promise. Bye, guys.